Welcome to Hail to the Podcast, brought to you by the Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan athletics over at michigan.rivals.com for, you guessed it, the Rivals Network. I'm Trevor McCue, senior editor at Maize and Blue Review, joined as always by our Intel insider and publisher, Mr. Maize and Blue Review himself, Josh Henschke. How you doing? A little bit calmer Sunday this week.
Yeah.
Still lots to talk about, but a little bit calmer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We've had rain all day. It's been kind of lame.
Yeah, we'll probably get some thunder here mid podcast. So just looking out my window now.
Was that some kind of like tease pun thing, or is that just how that worked?
Maybe. I mean, some lightning may strike during the podcast. You never know, but
Boo.
Fight for real.
Actually, I'll have to send you a picture of it. I have a massive branch in my backyard up onto my patio. I didn't think the storm was that bad. I don't know where it came from, but I gotta go take care of that. So anyway, not a crazy Sunday, but still lots to talk about. Obviously, June has been a busy recruiting month. Some pieces have fallen in place. Some other pieces might be getting closer. So we're going to talk about, obviously, what's been the topic of conversation most of this month, and that's the one's Ohio State now, but the two corners from Ohio, Bryce West and Aaron Scott, where we think Scott is now in terms of Michigan, and now that West is committed to Ohio State, and where Michigan may turn next at corner. We do have a commit at the edge position and another question about another edge player and kind of where that board sits. And then Josh has a lot of good nuggets on 2025 QB recruiting. So we're definitely going to get into that later in the show. And if we have time, there's some NBA stuff relevant to Michigan we can talk about. We'll finish off there, but we're going to start with the literal Olympic level speedster out of Idaho. Mm-hmm. And that is Gatlin Bair. I did it. We were joking. I've been calling him Gatlin Blair. So Gatlin Bair. This guy, you talk about a fast riser. It's not a hot take to say he's probably going to be a 5-star by the end of this recruiting cycle. He is out of Idaho, spent some time with Colston Loveland this weekend. He will be taking a mission trip upon graduating high school, so he's kind of technically in the 2026 class. Mm-hmm. That being said, you'd like to have him committed to you. It's a lot easier to keep him. They'll probably still have to re-recruit him later, but you'd like to get him wrapped in. But anyway, he visited Ann Arbor this weekend, and could it have gone any better, Josh?
No, couldn't have gone any better. They knocked it out of the park. Michigan did. I mean, I couldn't think of a better scenario other than obviously him walking away with a commitment. Probably I wouldn't consider anything better than that, but I do think Michigan walked away as leaders for him. Absolutely. I think they did a really good job with not only him, but also mom and dad too. They played a huge role with mom and dad, and I think they really.
I feel like we say that a lot.
Yeah, it is a broken record, but
it's worth pointing out for sure.
Yeah, no, these parents are just as important in a good majority of these recruitments, and I mean these parents have to be comfortable sending their kids away to be coached by these people. So
especially in this case, very far away too.
Yeah, no, it's no, I would say that, but I think I placed a future cast prediction in favor of Michigan for Gatlin Bair today. I think this would be a potential huge land. I think it's going to come down to Michigan and Boise State. A lot of people would see Michigan versus Boise State, a recruiting battle, and laugh, but the home poll is legitimate. But at the same time, I kind of make that argument saying, okay, if Bair really wants to stay close to home, then what's he going to do when he spends 2 years overseas? So that kind of takes away.
Interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, his parents may want him home, or, he would like to stay home. But at the same time, you have to factor in the mission trip that he's going to take. I mean, that's 2 years overseas. Yeah. And he's also going to be doing track overseas as well. I'm not sure where, but I was told that he was going to be doing track. But again, there's a possibility there that the distance may not even be a factor 2 years from now, because he's going to be spending so much time away from home. But I was told that going back to Michigan, Rob Bellamy took this by the horns and was just in control the whole time. This was his recruitment. This was his day to show, or weekend to show everyone around. Harbaugh, was as advertised, as what I was told. It was really very impressive to Gatlin and his parents. Michigan impressed with their strength and conditioning program.
There's another consistent theme.
Yep, and nutrition program, which are one of the biggest factors that we're talking about in Gatlin's recruiting process. So I think Michigan ticks some major boxes. He has a official visit to Boise at the end of July, so I don't think he's close to a decision. But however, I do feel as if Michigan is sitting top for him right now, and we'll see what happens during that Boise State visit. But I think Michigan has all the resources and has all the power to really seal the deal if it wants to. But that mission trip complicates things a little bit. But they took a flyer on a guy like Andrew Gentry, who I think is going to be very, very good. So I don't think it's going to be an issue long term. But I think it's better that he is 2026.
In terms of this class,
he could probably come in and as long as he keeps his athleticism, which is I have no suspect that he won't, but I think Michigan is in a really good spot. The pull to home is real, but I do think Michigan will win out in the end. When, I'm not sure, but you got to like where Michigan sits coming out of this visit for sure.
I don't know if I could draft up a better scenario of pitches for a prospect like Gatlin Bair. Gatlin Bair. Pull to home, Idaho, blah, blah, blah. Oh, here's Colston Loveland.
Yep.
You're going to hang out with him on this trip. A guy literally from your area who's doing the exact thing you're talking about, this long distance with your family, right? Oh, well, I'm going to be going on this mission trip. This is very important to me. I need to know that the school is going to be able to bring me back up to speed when I come back. Blah, blah. Oh, here's Andrew Gentry. Just did the exact same thing you did, right? And then you brought up Ben Herbert. I think Ben Herbert, right after the success on the field, right, and then each position coach, how they've been doing, Ben Herbert comes up in almost every single recruitment. The guy has just been absolutely incredible for this program. He's a huge hit on the recruiting trail. And then somebody like Bair specifically, who has interest in medicine, sports medicine, that kind of thing. Like, it's just, if you don't get Bair, it's kind of like you just shoulder shrug because you got everything lined up nicely for him. So, and again, this is a guy they were in on early who has now just taken recruiting by storm. And like I said, I would not be shocked if he's a 5-star by the end of this. The guy, I think it's a 10, 15, 100 meter, something just stupid like that. He's so quick, man. So we'll see. Obviously, a little bit of time before he commits and then a little bit of time before he steps on the field in Ann Arbor, but you got to like the position that Michigan is in with Gatlin Bair. You do not like the position Michigan is in with Bryce West, which is none. Bryce West did commit to Ohio State this weekend. Not a terrible shock. I think a lot of the news of Michigan trying to maybe get a midweek visit was hoping to get him to stave off that commitment. I think they knew there was a serious threat that West would commit this weekend and hoping to delay that a little bit. Yeah. Obviously, they were unable to do that. West has been, going back to April, he said pretty flat out that Ohio State was his leader. So I think Michigan made a great run at him. And again, if you want to call that a moral victory or whatever, I think them being in it as long as they were was impressive. Not shocked there. But Aaron Scott also in Columbus this weekend did not commit to Ohio State. We felt Michigan could be in the lead at this point heading into Columbus. Feels like he's going to be either early July, late July, sometime in the next month, possibly going to drop as a commitment. You still calling Michigan a leader with Aaron Scott, or where do you think things sit after his official visit to Columbus?
I think it's a little too close to call. I would say I think Michigan is a leader right now. I wouldn't say I know for a fact Michigan is a leader. I think Michigan is in a really good spot. The relationships are strong. Him with Jacob Oden are super close. I think it's a little too close to call, but right now I would say I think Michigan is a leader, and it's close. It's very close. I think the visit to Columbus kind of evened it out a little bit, just like I think the same situation was with with Bryce West as well, where I think Michigan evened out a little bit as well. But yeah, it's a very tough situation. The staff, I will tell you what the staff think. I think that the staff feels very good about their chances, and you can take it or leave it at that point. I mean, Michigan feels good about a lot of recruits that don't necessarily pan out in their favor, but most of the time their confidence is well placed, and they feel confident for a reason. And I think Scott has given a lot of clues as to how Michigan factors in for him. So I think coming out of that Ohio State visit, no news is good news, obviously. But I do think he would probably need to visit campus again at some point to kind of get another look and get another refresh. I don't think that if he doesn't make a trip anywhere after this, that he's for sure going to Ohio State. But I think another trip to Ann Arbor is a very positive sign and a positive development that, he's really weighing this thing out. But, going by what the staff feel, the staff feels pretty good, then, I kind of have to go with what, we're being told, and that Michigan sits in a pretty good spot. So I guess today, if I were, forced to choose, I would reluctantly pick Michigan because I just don't really know. I just don't know for sure. I think it is too close to call right now, but the fact that they have Ohio State has Bryce West committed, I think that really opens up Michigan's chance of saying, hey, you can be the lead guy to go alongside with Terian Nichols, who they had on campus this weekend that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, I do think I think Michigan will get Aaron Scott when all is said and done, but I don't say that with a ton of confidence.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this entire time that West and Scott needed to be recruited differently. They're different players. I don't think actually, I mean, we know the push of like the two of them teaming up together wasn't something that was going to land, right? They weren't two guys that were really committed to playing in the same spot, right? Yeah. Scott strikes me as a kid that doesn't necessarily love all the attention. And I don't think he knows where he's going yet. And I think letting the dust settle a little bit because June has been a lot of attention. I think letting the dust settle a little bit. And then, like you said, potentially coming back to campus again in under a much lighter, microscope or whatever, just a nice little chill visit coming up again, just to maybe get a couple things buttoned up. But on this last visit, I know they got into the books, him and Klink, and they talked about like, this is how we're going to use you. Really checked a lot of those boxes. So I'm with you. I feel confident about Scott with Michigan, because I think the family pitch and that atmosphere and this group that's already committed to Michigan, I think he felt that vibe, and I think he leans there. But when he's home now, and again, lets the dust settle for a couple of weeks, I think he'll start to feel pulled in one direction, and that's going to be where he decides. And we'll obviously keep an eye on if he does come back again. But if he doesn't, like you said, I don't think it necessarily means anything negative or positive. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of pro OSU chatter coming out of this weekend. That's a win. He didn't commit, and we're not seeing the Gatlin Bair type feedback for Aaron Scott at OSU. So at that point, you're still in it. You feel good, right? So you brought up Terian Nichols, another Ohio corner who might be interested in committing soon, potentially. Yep. He is, I mean, there's a group of schools here I feel like I name every single weekend: Kentucky, Pitt, Penn State, Michigan. He's in that group. Right now it's definitely feeling like Kentucky versus Michigan, which means more specifically it's Steve Clinkscale versus Vince Marrow. Yeah. And Mr. Marrow has not been scared to go public with his attacks on Michigan and recruiting and Harbaugh specifically. And just, they obviously used to work together in Kentucky, and they're battling over an Ohio kid that used to go to Kentucky a lot. So that's going to be a fun recruitment to watch the next couple of weeks. But he was on campus this weekend. How do we feel about Terian Nichols?
Yeah, Kentucky sure seems to talk. Well, I should say Vince Marrow sure loves to talk a lot, and he doesn't have very many recruiting wins over Michigan. So it's you love to see it. So with Terian Nichols, I think it's funny. I got a message right before we came on the podcast, and it was basically saying that that they kind of expect him to be in the class, but it's not a for sure done deal. And I can't say it's a done deal yet either. But I do think Michigan put themselves in an excellent spot for Nichols coming out of this weekend, and they sold Nichols on the fact that he could be CB2 next to Aaron Scott in the class. So they kind of sold the Ohio kid like kind of the same way of like, hey, you like the false potential of, hey, you and Bryce could play together to Aaron, but they kind of said, hey, you guys can be the 1 and 2 corners in this class, with Aaron obviously being the the gem of the 2 out of the Ohio commits. But I do think that message resonated, and I think that visit did do pretty well. I mean, I think Michigan is. I'm hesitant to say that Michigan leads here because I don't know for sure. But the expectation now is that if the sooner he announces his commitment, the better that bodes for Michigan. And I agree with that take. Somewhat trending towards putting in a future cast for Michigan, but not quite ready just yet. But again, if I were to guess today, I would say Michigan probably did enough to get his recruitment, and the growing belief is that he'll be in the class, but we'll have to wait and see whether that belief is true. And this is not me speculating. This is from people I'm talking with who are saying this stuff. It's not me saying maybe this will happen, but I think Michigan has done themselves a pretty good job of getting in on some guys that when they weren't necessarily on the outside looking in, because the case of Gatlin Bair especially, I think they were right there at the top, 1 or 2, and probably the same goes for Nichols as well. So if they can land both of those guys out of Ohio, Michigan's continuing to establish those roots in the state, only bodes well for the future. But I really like that 1-2 class of Nichols and Scott for sure.
Yeah, I think we were just talking about the Scott and West pitch. I think you're spot on. This is where I think Scott potentially could like being the top guy here at Michigan. I think he's somebody who, I don't know if it was because you've brought up growing up an Oregon fan, right? Like, I don't think he feels that bond to Ohio State that West did. And I think he might kind of like the idea of blazing his own path. And then the most important part, what you just talked about, I think it's a fit thing. I think him pairing with Nichols is a good fit. Mm-hmm. And I think they both are man defenders that could see what Steve Klingscale can do for them, right? I brought up with the Ohio State pitch to Bryce West, I said something about like, you're going to sell the guy on Marcus Lattimore. They can, because obviously he knows who Lattimore is or whatever. But like, I saw him, I knew Michigan was in trouble when he said something about Ohio State being DBU. I was like, they haven't been for a while, buddy.
Yeah.
all time, maybe. Yeah, but they haven't been for a while, right? So I always love talking about when you can point to results and what I can do for you, and you're the next guy, not the one I need you to turn things around, fix it, whatever. I think that's always a big positive. And Michigan has that in their favor with Steve Klingscale. I'll brag about him all day, every day. What a great hire that's been. Yeah. But I like Michigan's positions with Scott and Nichols. Excuse me. I saw, Jason brought up Grimsley. We don't like talking about what we don't know about. We always say that, right? So right now, Grimsley is a guy that came in. We haven't heard a ton on him. Michigan's in the mix, but he's not somebody I've heard's like Michigan's in the top 1 or 2. Yeah, he's definitely a factor, as well as a couple other names. But right now, it feels like a Scott and Nichols tandem is really where Michigan is trying to go. So easy transition here to Ryan Nichols to Dominic Nichols. So Dominic Nichols, I was laughing because you texted me like, hey, have you heard anything about Nichols possibly committing tomorrow? Whatever. We spent like half hour kind of looking into it, chasing it down. And then he announces on Twitter he's committing the next day. I'm like, oh, there we go. All right, cool. Yeah. So that played really well into, we're talking about a guy that could have been a Wisconsin Badger a few weeks ago. And some people thought might be trending to Clemson, that they were coming up really quickly here. So Nichols ends up picking Michigan over Kentucky, Wisconsin, and again, Clemson. He's been one of my favorite targets in this group. Again, I talk about fit all the time. I tweeted this when he got his offer. I said he can play hand in the dirt, defensive end, or stand up edge, bullies linemen with his hands, relentless pursuit of quarterback. And I haven't seen anyone in the 24 class hit a QB harder when they get home. Michigan needs to recruit him hard. They did. And now Dominic Nichols is coming to Ann Arbor.
Yep. Yeah, this is a good job by Mike Elston. A good job of identifying and closing the deal. I know Clemson was coming on late, and Michigan was a little bit nervous about Clemson. I didn't really hear any nerves about Wisconsin, but heading into his official visit, what was it, 3 weeks ago, Wisconsin was thinking that they had him. And he was telling Wisconsin commits that he was thinking about committing that day while he was on the visit to Wisconsin. So his mom told him to, hold off and take his visits. And, this time you say, thank you, Mom, because, he made his visit to Ann Arbor. And, shortly after that, that pretty much closed the deal. I mean, we were expecting heading into the Michigan visit that this was going to close the deal. And there was some talk that he could be on commit watch heading into the visit. But it's a good job sealing the deal. Another, kind of a ball of clay that Elston can work with, a guy that's really raw, but, will be able to make some plays down the line if he can develop like Michigan thinks he will. So they have a couple of guys like that in this class. Jaden Smith's another big one that I can think of right off the top of my head. Kind of pitching and a lot of with these offers and these takes, and Devin Baxter too, these long-term, not necessarily long-term, like as in 3 to 4 years, but maybe 2 years down the line that they can be turned into guys that can, that can rotate in or, be a star on the line. So at this point, the way Michigan's producing defensive ends, I have no issues with who they take. Because, Mike Elston has been developing these guys like crazy and likely going to send a couple more into the NFL after this upcoming season. So, again, you won't see me scratch my head and say, I wonder why they, picked him over whoever. But they're certainly not done. Elias Rudolph is committing here in about a week or so, and we're expecting that to be Michigan. A couple other names left on the board. The spots are running out. There's probably realistically only 2 spots left, maybe 3 spots after Nichols committed. But a lot of potential in that group. And Nichols is another one of those guys that adds some through the roof potential. And I know people will say, "Oh, look at the star rankings. He's only a 3-star." But again, these are the type of guys that you say just look at the offers. Right.
Right. And Clemson wanted him.
Right. Clemson.
And they just took Darian Mayo for Michigan. So
right. It's a decent trade. I would take that trade. But yeah, it's just another underrated guy that they can produce to be someone that can, contribute down the line for sure.
What I like about Nichols is, there's been a consistent theme amongst a lot of players Michigan recruits, but when we talk about versatility, it's also versatility in growth, right? So Nichols right now, when I watch him, I think could be like an Ojabo style weak edge defender, right? But he could also grow into Mike Morris and be 6'6", 290, right? Yep. And the way he hits and tackles and specifically gets after the quarterback, he reminds me a lot of Cole Sullivan. And that's a guy right now that's technically a linebacker, 6'3", 200, who Chris Partridge was like, hey, I think you could play Mike. I think you could play weak side edge. You could add set. We don't know what you're going to grow into, but you do things football wise that we know we can develop you, and we're going to find a spot for you either way, right? You're not pegged. And I like that a lot about the way Michigan's recruiting. And I look at Nichols and I'm like, he could become 2 or 3 different things for this team. But when I look at his highlights and I see the flashes, I think about Jesse Minter a lot. And I know Jesse Minter is probably not going to be here a long time, but what he says is part of the culture that Michigan's built. And it's always about we know what the best thing a player can do is. It's our job to get them doing that consistently.
Yep.
Right. And specifically the edge position. We hear that all the time about the guys coming into this year, Braden McGregor, Derek Moore, all have the potential to be some of the best pass rushers in the Big Ten, maybe all of college football. We've seen them do it in individual plays, getting them to do it consistently. So when you talk about Nichols' development, I think you're right. I think he's a guy that could contribute earlier. He might play it, take some time playing into whatever frame he's going to grow into. And then, sophomore year, junior year committing, he could be one of those dudes that once he finally hits the consistency check mark, he's a beast, right? But he fits into this class great. And Michigan likes rotating dudes. And I do think Mayo is an L. That it's a loss. It's a guy you wanted, right? But I continue to just be happy with what Michigan's doing because I see potential here. You brought up Elias Rudolph, the guy that can drop. There's nothing new on Brian Robinson. We talk about him all the time. I still think he could be in this class. I think he might not be trending that way, but we'll see. And I'm going to keep it that way till I hear any different. But the other name is Jacob Smith.
Yep.
He was on campus again this weekend. Kind of smart, took his OV earlier and then visited again with his brother. He's a guy we thought might commit this weekend. And now that he hasn't, I think some people are getting nervous because of Mayo and Childs and what happened there. He's a guy that's just been to Michigan and Nebraska, but he's got some big time offers. And again, if you want to talk about recruiting rankings, he's not crazy underranked, but this guy's got offers from Alabama, USC, Georgia, right? He's a big time prospect. So should Michigan fans be nervous about Jacob Smith? Is this going to delay further, or, are some of these big dogs going to become a factor now?
I don't think so. I think right now it's down to a Michigan versus Nebraska personally. I think the way I was explained it, the whole Smith's recruitment coming out of this weekend is that Michigan basically leads in every single category, except for the fact that he's been open about wanting to perhaps maybe do something different in terms of not following his brother to Michigan and going his own way. So which would be kind of surprising because, we've said it hundreds of times.
The twins,
they're with twins. They don't necessarily go their separate ways. They're very much together. And I'm not saying that this is absolutely going to happen. I do think Michigan gets him and I do think he ends up in the class, but I think Michigan is aware that he has these thoughts of, hey, maybe I want to do my own thing. But at the same time, Michigan has everything he wants. Michigan it checks every box. And then also Michigan has family there for him. Does that win out in the end? And I think it does. I think Michigan is going to close out this defensive end class with Elias Rudolph and Jacob Smith. I think those two are probably going to be it, considering what they have. And, we'll see. Ultimately, time will tell. I think I personally am not nervous, but I think you have to be cognizant of the fact that he is thinking, and it's not like this is a big secret either. I mean, he's been pretty open about wanting to do his own thing and in terms of his recruiting process for,
right. We've said we don't want this perspective that he's coming here because of his brother, and that's why he's being diligent in the recruiting. It's different if he starts saying, I need to do something different, right?
Right.
I don't want this to be the framing of my decision. I picked Michigan because Michigan's right for me. That's one thing. But if it's like, I'm now no longer interested in Michigan because I really want to do something different, that's a different conversation.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and we're looking at, I know the last time I spoke to him was during his his official visit in early June. I think he said he wanted to have this wrapped up around 4th of July weekend. So I'm not sure if that's a for sure thing or if that's changed, but it's trending to be early July, where things stand right now. So we should know here relatively soon. And which is kind of the nice thing about this defensive end class is that those last two guys that you really are looking at in terms of Rudolph and Smith are done in July. Well, we think Smith's done in July, but so we won't have to wait too long to kind of see how everything plays out. They'll have a full deck in terms of the defensive ends there. So yeah, am I nervous that Smith will go elsewhere? No, not right now until I hear otherwise. I do think he'll end up at Michigan. But it's probably taken a little bit more convincing than some maybe have previously thought. But also have to keep in mind at the same time that Smith has been pretty open about the fact that he wants to at least pursue his options and kind of figure out his path. So, he'll have to sit down and figure that out. But he's got mom and dad in his corner. Michigan has mom and dad in their corner. Obviously, they have Gerard in his corner. So a lot of pro Michigan in his corner. But they're very aware that he wants to do his own, that he could do his own thing, and they're going to respect that decision either way. But I still like Michigan's chances.
If Michigan didn't have such a wide net on the edge class and their commits were Devin Baxter and Dominic Nichols, you'd probably be pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
Both those Maryland kids are good fit. And again, we've got Sullivan, potentially edge, Hammond and Smith's brother right now considered defensive lineman, could be an edge role, could be defensive tackle, again, depending how they develop. You add Elias Rudolph to that, and then potentially Jacob Smith, and then again, Brian Robinson, and then something you hinted at on the board today that I think needs to be talked about as well as before we move into the 2025 class. Michigan's at 23 commitments right now. That is a lot compared to where they normally sit.
Yeah.
Michigan normally under Jim Harbaugh thrives late in the year, whether it's because on-field results between other programs somebody might be interested in, coaching changes, just the way recruiting develops, whatever. There's been multiple guys that have been snagged late. One guy, I'm going to bring this up, it's not even super relevant to what we're talking about, but Josh Henschke is the president of the Jair Hill fan club. John Stacy just chimed in. Hill, the CB from Illinois, will be the best recruit in the 23 class. He could be. They're talking about him like Will Johnson trajectory, right? And this is a guy that came in very late in the class. So I think Michigan has come into this year with the attitude of like, we're going to get the dudes we want, and we have the numbers because of the potential exodus of guys to the NFL next year, and we're not going to hesitate. And we're anybody we want that wants us, we're taking. We will figure it out later, right? And while maybe Childs and Mayo did kind of feel like a kick because partly just because Michigan was on a crazy run and not losing any battles for a while there.
Yeah.
Was it Mayo? Not so much. Mayo was a guy you hoped you got. Childs is a guy you kind of had penciled in the class for a while. Yeah. So that feels a little whatever. But I love who Michigan has already in June with 23 players. I like a lot of the guys that are still on the board. I would be shocked if we're not bringing up new names come September, October, November, into December signing day, right? There's just going to be something else, right? So whether, Smith commits, I'd like him to. I'm with you. I still think he will. It would just be kind of surprising if he didn't. Maybe the door's open for Robinson again. I don't know. But if they finish Baxter, Nichols, Rudolph, I think Michigan fans should be stoked. And I also think there's other dudes that could come up too. I mean, there's just, even when Michigan loses some recruiting battles, it just feels like, okay, because of what they've already done and what they could potentially do.
Yeah.
It's really impressive what's going on with the 24 class. And there's a lot of folks that think the 25 class could be even better. Starting with quarterback. This is going to turn into a Kirk Campbell praise session, but it should be. 2025 QB is maybe not necessarily as, I don't want to use the word important. That's not the right word. Urgent. I don't know. There's not as much pressure there as you thought there might have been if Michigan hadn't landed Jaden Davis. Obviously, Kirk Campbell comes in and helps close the door. You've got your 2024 5-star QB with Jaden Davis, but Michigan's on the best of the best in the 2025 class with quarterbacks. So one thing that needs to be brought up because of its relevance, and then we're going to go through what I feel like is probably the top 3 board at this point. Ohio State took a quarterback early again. Kind of surprising people here with Tavion St. Clair. I think there's at least one name on this list. If not all 3 of them might have been caught off guard by that. But Ohio State said they've got their guy. They've taken in St. Clair. We've seen how that has gone in the past, but they're hoping he sticks and that's it. But that really makes things interesting for Michigan targets here in 2025 class. I'm not sure what order I want to do this in. So why don't you pick one first of the three that we're going to talk about? Do you want to talk about McIntyre, Underwood, or Montgomery first here, you think?
Let's talk about Montgomery.
Okay.
He camped last week.
He's the one I feel like might have been caught off guard by the St. Clair commitment.
Yeah.
This is an Ohio kid. His brother's there. Yeah.
Yeah. So he visited last week for a camp. Obviously involved in the quarterback conversation. And the thing too with this Ohio State taking St. Clair is, are they going to go 2 quarterbacks? Because St. Clair's this 3-star guy who is having a strong summer, so he'll likely see a bump in his ratings because that's just the way it goes. But so do they go 2 quarterbacks? Do they stick with St. Clair? That's an interesting conversation.
Does St. Clair want to be part of 2 quarterbacks? Does Montgomery want to be part of? I mean,
I don't know. That's the question. That's the flip side.
I saw that rumor too, but these guys talk about they don't want to commit to a class potentially that took a QB the year prior,
right?
Let alone in the same class,
right?
So if that's their plan, okay, I'd be shocked personally, but
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just think that's a very interesting rumor.
Yeah. So I think. I mean, Montgomery is factored in there. I don't think he is as highly coveted as someone like a George McIntyre or a Bryce Underwood. He's still very much in the conversation, but those 2 other guys are, 1A and no, I wouldn't say 1A and 1B. I would say 1 and 2.
There's a number 1.
On the pecking order. And, I think he's involved, but ultimately we'll see. I mean, Kentucky's making a push for him too.
Yes.
So
that's what I was gonna say. I feel for the kid. He's been to Ohio State and Michigan more than any other program.
Yep.
Penn State, Kentucky, and then Georgia's there too, potentially. But yeah, a lot of these kids in the same way that, CJ Carr and Aaron Olin and Jaden Davis are linked. I think these dudes are going to be linked for a while too, because of their connections and being in the same program. So yeah, you kind of feel for him. He felt like, for a while there, it felt like Montgomery and Underwood, it was going to be like OSU or Michigan for either one, right? Like that might be how that goes. You brought up George McIntyre. We're going to get to Underwood. Everybody knows Bryce Underwood. We're going to get to him.
Yep.
George McIntyre is the number 2 QB in the 2025 class right now. He's a 5-star from Tennessee. He just took a weekend visit to Michigan. Him and Underwood, a lot of shared programs in the Venn diagram. He's in on the same programs. Tennessee, obviously, where he's from, LSU, Bama, Clemson, and then obviously Michigan. And this is where the Kirk Campbell love comes in.
Yeah. No, a 3-day visit, unofficial visit, is pretty significant if you ask me, especially for a 5-star quarterback. And I think he left with, from what I was told, Michigan is right there. Use that in quotations. Michigan's right there for him. So that would mean that he's right there at the top. And again, as you said, we're praising Kirk Campbell because he's largely responsible for this uptick in this uptick in recruiting. So he's doing a really good job. So I don't think Michigan would get McIntyre at the end of the day. I think he would stay, somewhere in, Tennessee is probably my best bet right now. I do think Michigan's in the conversation, but all eyes are on Bryce Underwood, and they rightfully deserve to be, because the kid's a stud right in your backyard. You're going to get Jeremiah Beasley. The 2 are friends. So, I think, again, it's good that you had a guy like McIntyre in for a 3-day visit, and I do think Michigan will be a factor for him. However, I think the focus is clearly on Bryce Underwood, and I think there's a good reason for that to be the case.
Well, let's not waste any more time. Bryce Underwood, number 1 quarterback in the 2025 class, arguably the best player overall in the 2025 class. He was just at Alabama.
Yep.
He's been to LSU. When the OSU commit with St. Clair came up, I told you, I didn't think that was an Underwood thing. I think if he was going to leave home, I feel like he's going to go far. Like he would potentially go south or whatever. Otherwise, but he obviously loves Michigan, and that wasn't the case a while ago. We have, again, Kurt Campbell really brought Michigan back into this recruitment and he's in Ann Arbor all the time. Mm-hmm. So again, he's the number one quarterback in this class. He should absolutely explore his options. He's going to these other big time programs, but I think Michigan has made it clear he's the top target, and I think Michigan feels pretty good about where things stand with him.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say that Michigan leads, but I am starting to believe that Michigan is the leader for him after every passing week. I mean, was on campus again for Michigan's 7-on-7 camp with Belleville, who won the event thanks to, Underwood being the quarterback. But yeah, I mean, Campbell has brought this thing back from the dead. This thing was not a factor a couple months ago. Now we're talking, Michigan is it's right there. I mean, I'm not going to say Michigan's going to land him 100%. It's done. It's all a, formality. But if I were to say, you were to ask me if I think Michigan leads right now, I would say yes. I think they do. I don't know if they do, but I think they do. And I think that Underwood has made that clear to the staff that they're highly considered and they're right there at the top. Why waste your time on a guy that, wouldn't reciprocate your interest? So the visit, you have to follow the visits. We're talking almost like once a week visits at this point, in the summer. I mean, it's crazy. And you've got,
he's clearly comfortable there, man.
Yeah, that's home.
It's that vibe, right? He can show up on a Wednesday.
Beloved around the Detroit area. When I interviewed him for that camp, so many adults and people came up to him and just shook his hand and, asked how he's doing. And then he would ask, how their families are doing and stuff like that. This guy is loved in the Detroit area. And, this is home for him. So I'm not going to sit here and say, Michigan is absolutely going to get Bryce Underwood, but I think if this continues to trend in the direction it is, I think they'll get Bryce Underwood. And, that would be a huge piece to the 25 puzzle if they can get him in early, but because he hinted to me when I spoke to him during that Wayne State camp that he was getting kind of overwhelmed with the process.
Yeah, he doesn't feel like a Davis guy.
No, he's a little more quiet and to himself, and he's overwhelmed with this process. So I know he's looking to at least cut down his list of schools here soon. And obviously Michigan's going to make that list. There's no doubt about it in my mind. And, we'll see what happens from there because quarterbacks do like to commit early. They like to get that out of the way, but I don't know if they will do it a whole year early. But again, if he's sick of the process and knows where he wants to go, why wait? So, we'll see what happens there, but I am cautiously optimistic that Michigan is in an excellent position to land Bryce Underwood.
Yeah.
And that's a stark difference from what you and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago. Where
I didn't like bringing him up.
Maybe,
yeah.
He might stay. He might go south. Now it's looking like he might not even leave the state. So that's again credit to Kurt Campbell for completely flipping that narrative on its head and getting right back into this thing. I mean, there's no doubt about it that this is, Kurt Campbell has a ton to do with this, and he deserves a lot of praise for the work he's done on the recruiting trail.
I keep bringing up Dante Moore and Donovan Edwards. Both were top at their position in their class. Both had strong pulls to Michigan, backyard, blah, blah, blah. Both explored their options, including rivals and SEC schools. One felt, you know what, after doing all this, I do want to leave. I don't want to be near home. And then the other one, Donovan Edwards, was like, no, this is home. I want to be a part of Michigan's, at the time, resurgence was how it was phrased to him. So we are running a little quick today. So Josh, for those of you listening on podcasts or watching a playback on YouTube, we do go live Sundays at 6 with the show. We interact with comments, and when we have time, we take some questions. So in line with Underwood, like Nate pops in here kind of saying what we said. He likes to commit, QBs like him like to commit early, potentially build a class. Do we think he could have a decision? I mean, how quick could we see a decision from him? I told you it's going to be a guy that I think is going to be a lot of Michigan games in the fall.
Yeah.
Do we think this is like, I'm going to finish my football season, high school first, and we'll get into like winter, spring, or could we see something this fall from Underwood potentially?
Maybe. I mean, it's hard. It's too hard to say. Like, I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't really.
No, that's not the question. Is when will he commit? Josh, give me the exact date.
Right. I could see a situation where he could commit in the fall, but I don't know. I mean, he's still got a whole year.
I think it would take a moment. I think he's at a Michigan game. We hear this so much with some players that like they already felt like they knew, blah, blah, blah. He's at a Michigan game and it's either the vibe of the stadium or something happens, whatever, that just like clicks and he's like, okay, this is it.
Yeah,
it could I think it would take some moment
like that too. You just it's tough to say. There's really nothing out there that suggests he's gonna wrap it up as soon as possible. I mean, he could just cut down his list and focus on. I mean, it could be a list of 8, could be a list of 10, could be a list of 3. I mean, we don't really know what that list looks like. So yeah. I think we'll get a better understanding of what his timeline might look like when he cuts that list down. And I know he says it's coming soon. So I don't know how soon is soon, but you know, we'll kind of get a better feel of how things are looking and trending in terms of a decision once he makes that cut down.
I think the Alabama offer was a big deal in a positive way in terms of like the pace of his recruitment. You know, is it a threat to Michigan? Absolutely. But for me, I think that felt like, okay, whether he's going to publicly put it out or not, I think he's got a few top schools in mind already.
Yeah.
And you can put the pieces together to see who they are. He's always going to feel comfortable at Michigan. That's been evident already. Beasley committing to Michigan very soon will be interesting because that like you said, maybe changes the dynamic there of that relationship. And again, I think Jaden Davis is just kind of waiting for the moment to be told. You know, he's come out and said like he's not a big pushy guy in terms of being a recruiter. But I think if you've got JJ and Jaden, once they're told like, hey, help us out here with a little bit with Bryce, and you're kind of creating that relationship of lineage there. It's just crazy to think of where we were a few months ago. I didn't even like bringing him up because I'm just thinking this is going to be Dante Moore. The dude wants to go south, right? Or USC maybe, whatever it might be. So I do think Michigan's offense this year could be impactful as well. I think if JJ is throwing it more, if Michigan is more creative in the passing game, I think that's something Underwood's going to like. Michigan was kind of giving Jaden Davis some sneak previews in practice. That's been talked about as well. Mm-hmm. Underwood's a guy that could go to an LSU or a USC and throw for just stupid statistics. So I think Michigan maybe giving the argument that that's something he could do here would only be helpful. Right. So, all right. That's where we sit with 2024 guys, the 2025 QB recruiting. Like I said, we've still got about 12 minutes. We're going to dive into some NBA talk here, but guys, feel free to throw some questions in the comments. We'll keep an eye on them for sure. I've got 2 surprises coming out of the NBA draft. And I would say, well, I guess it's technically one in that Jet Howard was above Kobe Buffkin and lottery pick.
Yeah.
I think the last week or 2 we were hearing, Kobe Buffkin had snuck into not just possibly lottery, but it'd be surprising if he wasn't a lottery pick. And then the exact opposite happens. So Jet Howard joins the Orlando Wolverines at number 11 and Kobe falls just out of the lottery at number 15 to Atlanta. So I guess neither one of you are us or NBA experts by any means, but just thoughts on, we'll start with Jet Howard going to Orlando. He's going to back up Franz Wagner. Might be bad news for Caleb Houston on paper if you look at that, but Howard going 11th and to Orlando like a lot of Michigan players have lately.
Yeah, I did some stories on grades and things like that, and this wasn't very well liked from the so-called experts. This wasn't they didn't think this was a very good pick, kind of a head scratcher. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's a bad pick because I don't know. I'm not a basketball expert, so I can't predict the future on how how these guys are going to, develop in the league. So, good for him, a fringe top 10 pick. I mean, that's not what we expected at all. As you said, a lot of the talk was that, Buffkin could be within the top 10 and
I
ended up,
saw him as high as 8.
yeah, number 8, which is crazy. So, and he ended up slipping a little bit after 11, but I did not predict Jet Howard being the first one taken out of the two, which is, good for him. Hopefully he has a long career in Orlando and potentially beyond that. So I think that the one thing that I will say for Jet Howard, though, is that I think he would have gotten a lot more praise nationally in terms of him being an NBA prospect if he had a healthy season. I mean, you're talking about a year that was probably 65 to 75% injured. Most of his time he had a bum ankle, and then it was the other ankle that turned into a bum ankle. So he had 2 bad ankles that he was playing on, and you could tell it impacted his game a lot. So, we'll see how he can develop when he's healthy. I mean, he can spread the floor. That gives another athletic wing for Orlando. They have an interesting team.
It's
Outside of
full
the
of big
jokes,
time college names, man.
right.
Like,
Outside of the jokes of them, taking their Michigan players, they have a lot of intriguing players on that team. A lot of young guys that, if they can develop them, they should have a pretty good team here in a couple of years. Really exciting big front court, and Franz Wagner is just only going to get better. But yeah, I mean, good for Jet, and for Kobe too. I think he's in a position where he can get some time and get some patience from the Atlanta coaching staff and front office to get him some time to get acclimated to the league and grow a little bit, because his main thing was that, he was a late bloomer, and, he's going to need a little time to grow. But I think he'll get that opportunity in Atlanta, and him alongside Trae Young is a really interesting backcourt duo. We'll see if he gets starter minutes, or if he's what kind of role he gets with Atlanta. But that's not a bad spot for him.
It's not. Atlanta was in a lot of turmoil towards the end of last year, but obviously with the moves they've made, they're looking to rebuild. They're going to cut some salary, here. So I'm with you. I think he's going to get time and opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out down there. It's not terrible in that way. Adding Snyder late in the year was a big deal as far as their new head coach. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, Orlando's fun to me. I mean, when you talk about, I was looking at their bench and it was like, oh yeah, Cole Anthony is there.
Yeah.
Right. And I forgot about Jalen Suggs, and they have Markelle Fultz. I mean, it's a lot of the guys in the NBA draft. I'm like, wait, who is this? Right. Because what translates from college to the NBA is, I think, very different, almost more than any other professional league. Right. You can watch the NFL draft, and if you're a big college football fan, who most of the guys are in the first round. And the NBA is different in that sense, where you look at the Magic and it's like, oh, Wendell Carter. Yeah. Oh, Paolo. Okay. Like, I remember all these dudes, so that'll be a fun team. And yeah, he gets to be potentially the number one scoring option for the bench in Orlando early. So I don't think that's a bad fit. I was surprised to see him go that high. And as far as draft grades, again, the NBA is more lottery ticket than any other league. I think these guys have no idea. You're drafting international players, freshmen, guys that went to G League, overtime elite, whatever. Like, all of it is potential, other than like the top, in this case, Wemby is he's the next LeBron in terms of hype coming into the league. Right.
Yeah.
And then Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller. Like, the NBA every year is like, maybe there's a clear number one. Arguably there's 2 or 3 top guys. Other than that, they're all lottery tickets. Like, you go back and look at the draft order and you're like, oh, I can't believe this team took that person in front of that one. So I don't care. If he was high, maybe, but they're all just guessing in the NBA. You have no idea what these dudes are going to be, because they're all so raw. Buffkin came on late. I mean, if we were talking last summer about Buffkin being a top 15 pick, people would have said we were crazy.
Right.
Right. So, and then Jet Howard, I think it's a good point to talk about his injuries. And I know people, again, with the NBA, the framing of, oh, he wasn't that great and he's bad defensively, but the NBA doesn't care.
Yep.
It's potential, man. The dude can shoot from anywhere, on ball or catch it. He can get to the hoop. He's got potential. That's all they care about. And that's what they draft for. We'll see. I don't know if they're perfect situations. I'm with you, but I think Orlando could be fun, especially as a Michigan fan with the guys there. And I hope Kobe gets his chances in Atlanta. But either way, awesome for Michigan basketball to see two guys go in the top 15. Good news for them. Another former Michigan player made some NBA news as well. I don't know if I would frame this as good news, but Jordan Poole was traded to the Washington Wizards from the former NBA champion Golden State Warriors. So they've had a change in their front office after a long run of success. There was kind of a thought, would they move forward with Poole and Wiggins and Kuminga and go to the young guys and maybe keep Curry around, but move on? I think this is a pretty obvious statement that the Draymond drama never went away. Yeah. And they're going to try and bring Draymond back and move on from Poole. So the one thing I'll say is in his favor is he's got his massive contract, and you and I joked, but I'm completely serious. I think Jordan Poole might lead the NBA in scoring next year.
He's going to average like 40 shots a game. I mean, it's not there's no one else on that Washington team that's any good now that Bradley Beal's gone. So he's going to be playing on a pretty bad team that blew things up. Well, I don't know if Washington even blew it up. I mean, there's nothing.
I'd say so.
Yeah, I mean, they had a
Beal's gone, Porzingis is gone. They're not going to re-sign the worst dresser in NBA history, Kyle Kuzma.
yeah, I guess, you're right. But I mean, it's going to be like a Russell Westbrook type of situation where he gets like 40 points on 25 for 50 shooting. So I mean, at least he got paid, and he'll get paid. But I don't think Washington's going to be a very fun team. This season, but we'll see how it works out. Maybe that's enough to get him all-star numbers, but they Washington got themselves a personality. I mean, I can say that. So
yeah, and we'll see. I mean, I don't think we're going to learn anything this year. Maybe next year we'll see. Like, are they going to build around Poole, or are they going to kind of ride out his contract as part of their rebuild? And is he going to have to kind of retool himself and find another spot after this time with the Wizards, or maybe he gets traded again in the future? I don't know. But he's a guy that when he left, people didn't think he should have. And he surprised some people being in the back end of the first and spent a little bit of time in the G League, and then gets a tiny role on the Warriors. And then he's like Steph Curry's mentee. And then he's a valuable part of a championship team. And then he's getting a 4-year massive contract. And it was like, yeah. So the guy's already achieved a lot of things that nobody thought he could. And he's got a ring. And he's going to go to Washington and at worst be allowed to do whatever the hell he wants next year. The team might not be fun to watch, but I think there's going to be some interesting stat lines coming out of our nation's capital when it comes to Jordan Poole next year. But all right, so that is going to do it for this week's episode of Hail to the Podcast. I'm going to remind you, as I always do, we are live on YouTube Sundays at 6, and a lot of the information we have shared with you this evening can be found at michigan.rivals.com in our message board community, The Den, where Josh is always sharing his intel. If you are not a member already, we would love to have you join us over at michigan.rivals.com. It sounds corny. We can give you the sales pitch, but in all seriousness, you can ask our subscribers. We're a big fan of the community we've built, and they're very vocal online about how much they like our community. So give us a shot. I think you'd be happy, and we'd love to have you join us in the conversation online as well as over at michigan.rivals.com as a part of the Maize and Blue Review. As always, I have been Trevor McCue, joined by our Intel insider and publisher, Josh Henschke, and this has been Hail to the Podcast.